From Pacifica, this is Democracy Now!
Idea's parents, Nate and Cleo, are in this chamber tonight, along with more than 24 Americans whose lives have been torn apart by gun violence. They deserve a vote.
President Obama uses his State of the Union to urge Congress to tackle gun control. We'll speak with Kathy Cohen, the Chicago professor and organizer who started the petition urging Obama to address the murder of 15-year-old Hadia Pendleton a week after she performed at his inauguration. We'll also speak with Bob Herbert of Demos on Obama's proposals on the economy and climate change. Then to Afghanistan.
Tonight, I can announce that over the next year, another 34,000 American troops will come home from Afghanistan. This drawdown will continue, and by the end of next year, our war in Afghanistan will be over.
While Obama says the war will end next year, the Pentagon says U.S. troops will remain in Afghanistan until 2024. We'll speak to peace activist Kathy Kelly, just back from the war-torn country, and we'll speak to Aura Bogado on what Obama didn't say about immigration. All that and more coming up. Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. President Obama gave further details on his second-term agenda Tuesday night with the annual State of the Union address. On the environment, Obama called on lawmakers to take action against global warming, but he refused to commit to binding cuts of U.S. carbon emissions, the world's largest per capita. With a number of victims of gun violence in attendance, Obama also urged Congress to vote on new gun reform measures, including background checks and bans on what he described as, quote, weapons of war and massive ammunition magazines.
Congress won't act soon to protect future generations. I will. I will direct my cabinet to come up with executive actions we can take now and in the future to reduce pollution, prepare our communities for the consequences of climate change, and speed the transition to more sustainable sources of energy. It has been 2 months since Newtown. I know this is not the first time this country has debated how to reduce gun violence. But this time is different. Overwhelming majorities of Americans who believe in the Second Amendment, have come together around common sense reform.
In his speech, President Obama also called on Congress to raise the federal minimum wage to $9 an hour from $7.25 and to automatically adjust it with inflation. On Afghanistan, Obama announced his plan to end the longest-running war in U.S. history by withdrawing about half of U.S. forces there by the end of the year.
Our forces will move into a support role, while Afghan security forces take the lead. Tonight, I can announce that over the next year, another 34,000 American troops will come home from Afghanistan. This drawdown will continue, and by the end of next year, our war in Afghanistan will be over.
We'll have more from Obama's State of the Union address and reaction after headlines. His announcement of a troop drawdown comes as a U.S. airstrike in Afghanistan has killed 10 civilians. The strike hit what the NATO occupation force called a suspected Taliban hideout in the province of Kunar. Most of the dead were women and children. California police say they believe former Los Angeles police officer Christopher Dorner has died in a final standoff in the snowy mountains of Big Bear. A suspect believed to be Dorner took refuge in a cabin after a car chase with police on Tuesday, leading to a shootout. A single gunshot was reportedly heard from within the cabin before it erupted in flames. Officers are now testing the dead body recovered from the site to confirm they found Dorner's remains. San Bernardino County Sheriff spokesperson Cindy Bachman said a sheriff's deputy was killed in the gunfight between Dorner and police, bringing his victim toll to 4.
The suspect that was driving the vehicle abandoned the vehicle and fled on foot into the forest. He barricaded himself in a cabin. At that time, there was an exchange of gunfire between the law enforcement personnel outside of the cabin and the subject inside. During that gunfight, two deputy sheriffs were shot. One of them died after being taken to Loma Linda. The second deputy is currently in surgery and is expected to survive.
Former police officer Christopher Dorner's apparent death would end a manhunt that began after he vowed to exact revenge on the LAPD for his firing in 2008. You can go to our website at democracynow.org for our coverage of the case. The Senate Armed Services Committee has voted to advance Chuck Hagel's Defense Secretary nomination to a full Senate vote. The vote was held along party lines, with Senator Carl Levin among the Democrats backing Hagel and Senator Lindsey Graham among the Republicans opposed.
If there is a risk here, it is that the defeat of this nomination will leave the Department of Defense leaderless at a time when we face immense budgetary challenges and our military is engaged in combat operations overseas. Such an absence of senior leadership would be unlikely to benefit either our national defense or our men and women in uniform.
The next Secretary of Defense is going to have to deal with a world on fire. And I just believe that the testimony of Senator Hagel was not reassuring. I don't think he did come across clear and convincing that he understood our policies toward Iran.
The UN Security Council has voted to strongly condemn North Korea for its latest nuclear test. On Tuesday, the Council unanimously voted to censure the North Korean government and vowed punitive measures. North Korea called the test a response to U.S. hostility, including the tightening of sanctions following a rocket launch in December and the recent staging of war games in the Korean peninsula. On Tuesday, the State Department confirmed it had received a warning from North Korea of a pending nuclear test, but that no dates had been specified. Syrian rebels have captured a military airport near the restive northern city of Aleppo in their fight against President Bashar al-Assad. The news comes amidst ongoing violence in the capital, Damascus, where both sides are fighting for control of key roads. On Tuesday, Navi Pillay, the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights, said Syrian civilians are paying the price for Security Council inaction.
The Security Council is at its best when it acts with a unified voice. The lack of consensus on Syria and the resulting inaction has been disastrous, and civilians on all sides have paid the price. We will be judged against the tragedy that has unfolded before our eyes. This Council, as well as those of us in key positions within the UN, will rightly be asked what we did.
According to Navi Pillay, the death toll from Syria's nearly two-year-old conflict is likely approaching 70,000. Bahraini forces have broken up a new protest against the ruling monarchy with tear gas and stun grenades. Hundreds of people tried to march to the capital, Manama's Pearl Roundabout, the symbol of their uprising against the U.S.-backed Bahraini regime. Thursday marks the uprising's two-year anniversary, and more protests are planned in defiance of a ban on demonstrations. Italy's former top intelligence official has been sentenced to 10 years in prison for his role in the CIA's kidnapping of an Islamic cleric. The official, Niccolò Polari, was convicted in the fallout over the abduction of Abu Omar from the streets of Milan in 2003. Omar was taken to U.S. bases in Italy and Germany before being sent to Egypt, where he suffered torture during a 4-year imprisonment. Polari won't have to serve jail time until his efforts for appeal are exhausted. His sentencing comes days after an Italian court gave the CIA's former station chief a 7-year term in absentia. 25 other Americans have also been convicted in the case, though the U.S. has rejected their extradition. Military officials at Guantanamo have admitted they've placed hidden microphones in the rooms where defense attorneys meet with detainees. The disclosure arose in the ongoing pretrial hearings for alleged 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 4 others. On Tuesday, a Pentagon official acknowledged the meeting rooms are bugged, but insisted the military never listens in on attorney-client conversations. Defense attorneys for the 9/11 suspects have expressed doubts about that claim and say their clients' trials may have been compromised. The Senate has voted to expand the scope of the landmark Violence Against Women Act. The new legislation affirms an earlier vote granting domestic violence protections to 30 million undocumented immigrants, LGBT people, and Native American women. 22 Republicans voted against the measure, including Senators Marco Rubio of Florida and Rand Paul of Kentucky. The vote will add to existing pressure on the House, where Republicans have proposed a narrower version. President Obama's announced he signed a new executive order to help defend the U.S. from computer attacks overseas. The measure creates voluntary standards for network security and promotes information sharing with private companies that help run critical U.S. infrastructure. The order is part of a wide package of steps that include the Obama administration's self-declared right to launch a preemptive cyber military strike on foreign targets should the White House deem it necessary to preempt an imminent computer attack from abroad. In New York, the decision over whether to lift a ban on the gas drilling process known as fracking is facing a delay after regulators studying its health impacts said they needed more time to complete a key review. The move could potentially delay a decision on fracking for months, leaving the ban in place. On Tuesday, the state's top environmental regulator said he may speed up the process by issuing permits for fracking before final regulations are created if the health department concludes the process is safe. Critics say fracking, which involves blasting liquid into deep underground rock, threatens the environment, water supplies, and public health. A federal judge has granted class action status to a lawsuit challenging the New York City police tactic known as stop and frisk. Judge Shira Scheindlin ruled a group of Bronx residents can bring claims on behalf of hundreds, perhaps thousands of their neighbors for being accosted outside the buildings in which they live. The ruling comes 1 month after Judge Scheindlin ordered police to cease the stop and frisks outside of residential buildings under the city's so-called Clean Halls program. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, The War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman.
And I'm Nermeen Sheikh. Welcome to our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world.
Thanks so much for watching this report from Democracy Now!, your daily independent global news hour. We don't accept advertising or corporate funding, but rather rely on donations from viewers like you. Please make your contribution by visiting democracynow.org. We need your support today to keep bringing you this hard-hitting, in-depth reporting.